Welcome, everyone, and thank you for attending our very first virtual event. Please note this is not our annual picnic. We can't serve you our famous sloppy joes, so this is our kickoff to the 2020 elections. Along with a very crucial presidential election coming up, we have to break the GOP majority in the state legislature. Today, we will be introducing you to an exciting slate of candidates running for the state legislature in the North Shore. So before we start, I want to thank Dan Folkman, who is doing very fine work with the Wisconsin Video Hub for helping us produce this event. Without his help, this would not have been possible. Like I said, this is our first virtual event, yet there are more to come until President Joe Biden leads us out of this pandemic. But in the meantime, I am thrilled to tell you about our annual fundraiser featuring the great John Nichols and other guests you will want to hear. This virtual event will take place on October 4th, and you can sign up for it now at www.grassrootsnorthshore.com. I am encouraging you to think about how you can financially support our important work that we've been doing over the past 16 years. Before we move on to our moderator and candidates, let's take a moment to check in with our man in Milwaukee, State Representative David Bowen, to hear about what's been happening.
Hey, Grassroots North Shore. I am State Representative David Bowen. Good to see you guys again virtually. A little bit different during the pandemic, but this is what we have to do, and I'm excited to let you guys know I am running again to continue the great work that I've done before in the state legislature and continue to fight on all the issues that I know that you guys care about, that the people out here that I have met, marched, and protested with, that they care about, to ensure that we are creating a more equitable, a more equal, a more just world, a more just state of Wisconsin, and a future that is secure with working class people getting their fair share. So that's what I'm focused on moving forward. We're going to continue to fight for Black lives. We're going to continue to fight for equity at the state level and do those good things on the committees that I've served on before, and hopefully some more to come. Hope you guys are well. Keep fighting out there. Keep getting engaged. Reach out to voters. They need to understand where we stand on these issues that really matter to them. So let's do the work. Let's do it virtually. Let's do it with social distancing and do it with a mask. I got an Ernest Lacey mask. Today was his 62nd birthday. He was murdered by Milwaukee police years ago, and we're here to celebrate him with his family out here. It is so important that we do not give up the fight for justice, and that starts with us every day. I'll catch you guys. Thanks.
Because the fall elections are coming on quick, we need to educate ourselves about our candidates to support them, and most importantly, work for them to win. Our stellar lineup includes Deb Andraka running against Jim Ott in the 23rd Assembly District, Emily Seacrest running against Dan Knudl in the 24th Assembly District, Dora Drake, the newly nominated candidate in Assembly District 11, running against the newly nominated Orlando Owens, and Neil Plotkin running to finally unseat Alberta Darling in the 8th State Senate District. Each candidate will provide a short introduction regarding why they chose to run in these races, and then we'll answer questions posed by our moderator, Attorney Edgar Lynn. Edgar himself ran for state assembly, and he knows the lay of the land. So here's my good friend Edgar, who will introduce you to Team North Shore.
Deb, thank you for being here with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Why don't you take a minute or two, tell us about yourself, tell us why you're running.
Sure. I'm running for state assembly in the 23rd district. That is Whitefish Bay, Fox Point, Bayside, the eastern chunk of Mequon. It gets gerrymandered the further you go west, and then all of Thiensville and all of Grafton. And I'm running because I think we need a safer, smarter, healthier Wisconsin. I come to the race most directly through my work with Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense. And I am a teacher, and I experienced a lockdown drill for the first time with kids in my classroom. And it's something that I felt strongly that nobody should have to go through. I didn't grow up having to do them, and I don't think my kids or anyone else's kids should either. So I started getting involved. In a previous career, I was an environmental lobbyist, and I worked with legislators. So I helped Moms Demand Action set up Advocacy Day and train volunteers how to talk to legislators. And that's where I came in contact most frequently with Jim Ott and Alberta Darling, trying to convince them that, according to polls, at least 80% of their constituents thought that background checks on all gun sales was a good idea. That's not what we have in Wisconsin right now. Jim Ott refused to meet with us on numerous occasions. He rarely returned phone calls. So I decided that if I couldn't change his mind, I would change his job. So my co-conspirator in Moms Demand Action is my campaign manager. And we decided to take on this race because we think the 23rd district deserves a representative who will listen to them and vote accordingly.
Great. All right, let's get to the first question. We have one of the oldest voucher program in the country. How would you compare your views of public and private education funding with those of your opponent or the Republican Assembly as a whole?
Sure. Well, my opponent has been in office for more than a decade. And during that time, he has voted in favor of the biggest cuts to public education in state history. I grew up walking to my local public school for elementary school, middle school, and high school. My two daughters also walked to their elementary school, their local public school, to elementary school, middle school, and high school. And I believe so strongly in the public education system that when my girls were smaller, Act 10 was passed. And I saw how many teachers were leaving the profession in droves, especially very experienced teachers. And I decided to do something about it. So I went back to school at age 46, got my teacher's license, so that I could help fill that shortage and try to make a difference one classroom at a time. So while my opponent was in Madison taking away from public schools, I was in the classroom giving back.
Well, thank you. Let's talk about bigger picture things. What do you consider the biggest challenge to the success of the state and the well-being of its population?
It might not be the answer you're expecting, but I really believe that gerrymandering is probably the biggest threat that we have right now. Not directly, but when you have a gerrymandered district, you have a situation where legislators don't have to listen to or be responsive to their constituents. And it's a situation where if your elected officials aren't listening to the people who put them in office, you can't make progress on any of the issues that are important to voters. So if we can fix gerrymandering, I think we can have a lot more progress on healthcare, on education, on transportation, on all of the issues that are important. We need to hold our elected officials accountable, and having fair maps is the way to fix it.
Okay, switching gears a little bit, let's talk about transportation. Transportation issues within the state have never really been resolved or even moved forward in the last 10 years. How would you address the need to increase funding without causing undue burden to the people of Wisconsin?
For so many years, the Republicans have basically been playing a shell game with transportation. They have been increasing fees everywhere they can. They have been borrowing, increasing interest payments, rather than addressing the problem head on. And in doing so, they are essentially sticking our kids with the bill because they're going to have to pay for all of the, not only interest payments, but all of the deferred maintenance. I don't think that there is one single answer to our transportation woes. I think we have to look at all kinds of options. I think we need to find a sustainable source, a multi-year funding options, probably several of them. And if we don't do that, again, it's our kids who are going to be paying for it. So it's time to step up to the plate and figure out ways to make this not such an ongoing battle.
Speaking of paying, the economy of Wisconsin is precarious due to the global pandemic, but also the long-standing losses of jobs in the dairy industry and other rural areas. What proposals might you make or support to get these sections of Wisconsin back on track?
Well, my district is largely suburban, so I'm probably right in between urban and rural. We hear an awful lot about the urban-rural divide, but I really think that there are a lot more things that connect us than separate us. We all want great schools. We all want safe communities. We all want a healthy economy. And I think that investing in the things that literally connect these communities can go a long way to helping the entire state. We talked about transportation. figuring out ways to fix our roads so that people who live in rural communities and on farms can get the products that they make and the businesses that they're running and get their services from rural areas to larger markets in urban areas. And another area is broadband. Look at us here today. All of us have just 10 times more appreciation for a decent broadband connection than I think any of us did 6 months ago. A lot of us take that for granted. In rural areas, it's not always the case that you can simply log in and have a good connection. Schools, when they open in the fall, you need students who have a strong connection. More and more farms are mechanized. Their tractors run on GPS systems. So investing in broadband that can, again, connect people who are in more rural areas will also help not only their economy, their schools, their education, and just about everything else that is being driven online by high-speed connections than ever before.
Okay, and here's the final question. What experience and skills do you believe make you qualify for this job? And in what legislative areas do you feel you have the most to contribute?
Well, I'm probably a little biased, but I think teachers make some of the best, because teachers, we love learning new things. That's why we go into the profession. We love meeting people from all different kinds of backgrounds and hearing different perspectives and new ideas. And it's this approach that I would take with me in being an elected official and having the privilege to represent the 23rd district. I think we need people who are interested in not just people who agree with them, but in learning a little bit more about the issues that face the district and face the state. If I'm elected, my door will always be open. I will work very hard on behalf of the people of the 23rd district. And I hope to have that opportunity in the fall. I have worked in lots of different sectors as well. I've worked for not-for-profit. I have worked for Fortune 500 companies. I've worked just lots of different areas. And again, that gives me the perspective that I think can be lacking. We need people who will listen, and we need people who come to government with an open mind. And those are two things that I can promise that I will bring to the office if I'm elected in the fall.
And what legislative area do you feel that you would like to contribute in?
I don't know what I will contribute the most in. If you would have asked me that in November, before most of us had heard of COVID, my answer would have been a lot different. I want to fight for public education and fair funding in public education. Being a teacher, I'm a former PTO president, and I have kids in public schools. So that's something that I would fight for. I come to from Moms Demand Action, so making sure that our communities are safe, that we have better gun laws on the books. It shouldn't have taken closing all the schools to reduce school shootings. That's something that I think that would make all of our communities a lot safer. So those are a couple of areas, but like I said, I come into this with an open mind. And if you're in elected office, you need to be more flexible than ever before. We're doing this on Zoom. We're doing this in a pandemic. I like to joke our campaign. So we filed in November, and then we launched in the first week of February during a blizzard. And then when it was time to collect our signatures in April, we had a global pandemic, so we couldn't go door to door. So look out for election day. We don't know what else they're gonna throw at us. But that's the kind of resiliency and flexibility that I think everybody needs to have if they're going into this work. And I think we just keep proving over and over that we have it.
Thank you, Deb. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you for coming here and being with us, Emily.
Thanks for having me.
Emily, why don't we take a minute or two, tell us about yourself, why you're running.
My name's Emily. I'm running in the 24th district, and I ran in 2018. I got more politically involved during 2015 and 2016, especially after President Trump got elected. And I just wanted to learn more about my representatives. And it finally got to a point where I realized that they were not representative of values that I believed in. And so 2017, I joined Emerge, which is a democratic training for women. And that kind of led me in a path of running for this position in 2018. It was very grassroots. It was like me pretty much running the campaign. And I'm really proud with how the race went. I pulled 46%, which obviously I didn't win, but regardless, for such a tough district that this is, I was really proud of myself. And kind of toiled with if I was going to try to run again in 2020 or if I was going to wait for new maps. And for me, I thought, well, I've already got name recognition, like I'm going to give it a go. And pretty much January 2019, I was able to hire my campaign manager, Jenny Fisher. And we started meeting right away, started our campaign plan, call time. Like we really hit the ground running hard. And, hence where we are today. Like we have a great campaign going right now and I'm really proud of it.
Great. So let's start with our first question. We have one of the oldest voucher programs in this country. How would you compare your views of public and private education funding with those of your Republican opponent or the Republican Assembly as a whole?
Sure. Well, I am a proud product of public schools. And my 6-year-old, who will be in first grade, also goes to public schools. So I support our public program here in Wisconsin. And learning a lot in 2018 about our voucher program, charter schools, and how that works. We only have so much funds that are allocated towards our schools. And for us to have so much of our tax dollars allotted towards our voucher program, it's really cutting into our public schools. And we've seen that. Act 10 went into effect. We are losing our teachers. Our retainability is pretty poor. And how I would like to work on it. Now, I know that there's areas, like if you look at Milwaukee, many individual residents feel that that's their only way of getting out of their economic status, right? And so I do understand that this is a fine line we walk on. But if we fully funded our public schools, we wouldn't be at a point where we had to choose, where they had to go to a charter school. And so for me, I want our schools to be fully funded.
Thank you. What do you consider the biggest challenges to the success of the state and the well-being of its population?
Wow, that's quite a question. I think when you look at our state, you know that we are progressive. We have roots of being a progressive state. And what has been happening is we've just been slowly chipping away environmental legislation that is taking away our resources. You look at our education system, we had one of the best, UW systems. Our UW system is something to be proud of, and we've been seeing funding taken away from that. And so what we need to do is go back to what our values are for our state and start funding in those areas, because at the end of the day, people want to live in Wisconsin. It's an area where people believe that it's rooted for families, good communities, good schools, trails. Our environmental resources are amazing. And I think there's other things that we can also add to that, like our healthcare system needs improvement, right? Like I think if we can start slowly putting our resources back where they belong, people are going to start to want to come back here and stay here and put their roots down. So, there's a lot of areas that I want to be a part of to assist with that.
All right, so let's talk about transportation. Transportation issues within the state have never really been resolved or even moved forward in the last 10 years. How would you address the need for increased funding without causing undue burden to the people in Wisconsin?
For taxpayers, yeah. And we saw at the county level in Milwaukee how County Executive Abley was trying to figure out how to add more funds to our transport issue. And, there was a lot of kickback because he was looking at, different taxes. And I think one thing we need to start really looking at, whether that's like the county level or the state level, is gas tax as well. And I think that's an area where, it's been discussed, but it hasn't actually been researched and seen if that's something that maybe we could do. Like we already know how that works. The wheel tax is kind of tough for a lot of individuals. It was a lot of money for people. And I also think you look at what was implemented along with the hybrid tax and, taxing people who are driving hybrid cars. Like we're not looking at the right areas, right? We're not addressing the real issue. We're making it harder for people. And so, I'm not saying that this is my strong suit, but it's something that I believe in and it's passionate. People need to have access to transportation if they're going to work. When I was running here in Brown Deer, there is a bus line that had been cut funding wise. And for people, they said, that's how I get to work every day. So what am I supposed to do now that the bus line has been cut? So, I I'm here to listen to those issues and address them and provide and surround myself with people who know how we can fix this.
Great. The economy of Wisconsin is precarious due to the global pandemic, but also longstanding losses of jobs in the dairy industry or other rural areas. What proposals might you make or support to get these sections of Wisconsin back to economic health?
For sure. I mean, our farming industry is vital to our state, and we know that. And we've seen it detrimentally gutted before even COVID-19. COVID-19 just made it just more exacerbated. So, for me, we need to do better for our farmers and our dairy farmers and figuring out how we're going to assist them. We know that dairy milk has been dumped. We know that farmers are filing for bankruptcy. And I think for us to be a state where we're economically more sound, we need to figure out how to help the farmers better. And on top of the COVID-19, I did a short video about how the policies at the federal and the state level are affecting many individuals. And so, one thing that I suggested, which my opponent has since actually tried to implement legislation because, whatever, but is that we needed to do better for our small businesses and allowing at the federal level, they had the PPP loans, and that was like gone within a week. So, we could have initiated something that would help small businesses here at the state level, which you're slowly seeing, right? Like Governor Evers did something, but we need to be there for people, not the big corporate interests. We need to be there for the small people trying to make it by.
All right, so here's the final question. What experience and skills do you do you believe make you qualify for this job? And what legislative area do you feel you have the most to contribute?
Sure. I think for me, like I've reflected on this for a while, and like I've had just kind of interesting realms of just my life, like joined the military, that taught me a lot and that brought me into my medical career. And then went to nursing school, and I had the GI Bill and student loan debt, like $40,000. So like every aspect that you hear how people are trying to survive, I've had that interaction in my life. And so I can empathize with people. It's not just being sympathetic. It's also being able to like really understand, like, I know what your struggles are and I want to help you with that. Even education, healthcare obviously is my strong suit. I've been in the medical field for over almost 20 years. And so that's definitely something that I feel A, passionate about, and B, I have a good understanding of. And so, moving forward, we don't have many medical professionals as state representatives. And I think that's something we need, especially during the pandemic where we're dealing with a huge health crisis. We need people that actually have boots on the ground, have gone through this, who understand just healthcare wise what we need to be doing versus someone who owns a tavern. Like, I just think I can bring a lot more to this seat, and I'm willing to work for it. I've been working a year and a half, 3 years pretty much for this seat. So, I feel like I deserve a chance at this.
Thank you so much for your time, Emily.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me.
Hi, Dora.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you for being here with us today. Why don't we start, just take a minute or two, tell us who you are and why you're running.
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you guys for having me here. My name is Dora Drake, and I'm running for State Assembly in District 11. So one reason is because I was born and raised in the district, and I've seen the changes that have happened over the years. And being a Milwaukee native, I decided to stay here, and I went to Marquette University, and I was the first in my family to graduate. And in my time at Marquette, I learned more about the disparities that we face, in our communities. And that led me from being a student activist on campus to a social worker in the justice system. And being a social worker for several years now, and also just watching what's been happening in our city, in our state, and nationwide, I think it's important that now more than ever, it's important that all of us, truly stay united in hope, because that's how we'll be able to work collectively together, as well as get some stuff done. And so because of that, I think in the midst of COVID, obviously we need to make sure that healthcare truly is a right and not a privilege, and making sure people have access to healthcare services. But in that, making sure families and children are supported, whether it's making sure they're able to continue their schoolwork, supporting families, making sure that they have enough funds, receive a decent wage to put food on the table, as well as making sure that those that are re-entering into our communities have the resources they need to truly make a positive change, not only for themselves, but the people that they're connected to, as well as the communities that they come from. And this is why I'm running.
Thank you. We'll move on to the next question, Dora. We have one of the oldest voucher programs in the country. How would you compare your views of public and private education with those of your opponent or the Republican Assembly as a whole?
Right. So it's vital that we obviously invest in public education. It's because education should be available, but also quality education as well. So my stance on it is that the majority of funds should go towards public education. But I also want to be mindful of the fact that I want families to feel empowered and being able to make the decisions that are best for their children as well.
A follow up on that question. Public schools in Wisconsin are funded with a combination of revenue, including various state and federal educational aids. State aids represent approximately 45% of school funding, and federal aids represent approximately 7% of the school funding in Wisconsin. So almost 50% of the schools are funded locally. What are your thoughts about that? And what, if any, change would you advocate making?
Yeah, absolutely. My stance on it is that the state should be the leader in determining what's best for our education. And in that, we need to be showing the investment as well. So I do believe that there should be more investment from the state funding, and also minimizing the impact of property taxes that has on school districts. Is because that's not fair to have residents pay for education. And as we know, obviously the more affluent neighborhood you come from, the better opportunities you have for that school in your district. And that's not fair to the children and families. So my stance on it is that there should be less support coming from property taxes and definitely coming more from the state, and making sure that there's funds to making sure there's quality education.
Thank you. Let's move on to a bigger picture. What do you consider the biggest challenges to success of the state and the well-being of its population?
Yeah. So the quick answer is the environment. And when I say environment, I mean 3 different things. So the first things obviously are natural resources. We're next to one of the largest natural resources, which is Lake Michigan, and water. So it's important that we not only maintain and look into efforts to prevent pollution, but also reinvest in making sure that we replace the infrastructure of lead pipes, as well as hold corporate farmers and things of that nature accountable, and using those carbon taxes at a higher rate. So in that way, we reduce the agricultural runoff that's happening in our rural communities as well. And so I do believe there should be a reinstatement of those restrictions as well. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say the 2 other points is going to be the social economic development, right? So making sure, one, that people have a fair wage, whether that's $15 an hour at least, but making sure that they can also fend for their families, and making sure there's access to that, whether it's transportation, making sure that there's childcare available that's affordable, and also supporting local minority-owned businesses, just because they are like part of the core in terms of our communities. And specifically stating, Milwaukee is the economic heart of the state. So just as much we should support local and rural, communities, we need to make sure that that shared revenue also be increased to balance, what we contribute to the state. And last but not least, I think it's gonna address the racial disparities. We're living in a time where everything's heightened, and rightfully so, because these things have been happening for years now. So when we look at racial disparities, making sure that we look at addressing the issues of, access to school, right? Access to school, as well as mental health resources, reducing the incarceration rate, supporting those that are even coming out, and supporting family services.
Thank you. So I want to talk a little bit about transportation. Transportation issues within the state have really never been resolved or even moved forward in the last 10 years. How would you address the need of increased funding without causing undue burden to the people in Wisconsin?
Right. So we should definitely look into establishing regional transit authorities here. and accepting actual aid from the federal government when we do have that is because they'd be able to levy, funds in order to generate that revenue in order to fund, making sure that our roads are safe, making sure we have commuter rails that are connected throughout the whole state overall, as well as improving our public transportation as well.
All right, so let's talk about the economy. The economy of Wisconsin is precarious due to the global pandemic, but also the longstanding job losses in dairy or other rural areas. What proposals might you make or support to get these sections of Wisconsin back to economic health?
Absolutely. I know currently, I think early in the year, Governor Evers, issued proposals to the legislature about expanding on supporting rural and dairy farmers and things of that nature. So one thing I'm definitely huge on would be supporting that initiative, especially pushing the expanding the farm to school program, where not only we're having local farmers, obviously share their produce with community, schools, homes, but especially since now a lot of our food, if we go out, is curbside, putting investment funds to creating transportation jobs. That way, not only are we making sure that those individuals are having their produce, purchased and things like that, but we're also creating additional jobs for people that can drive to and from to deliver those goods to people, whether it's at home, schools, and things of that nature. And it's sad is because, Wisconsin's legacy is known to be the dairy state, and the fact that we're leading in farm bankruptcies is wrong. And so we need to make sure that we support and protect, our dairy farmers, because they are part of the heart of the state. Just like Milwaukee's the economic state, our farmers are the legacy, of Wisconsin as well.
Okay, final question.
Yes.
What experience and skills do you believe make you feel qualified for this job? And in what legislative areas do you feel the most you can contribute to?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So first and foremost, like I said, I was born in the district and I've lived in Milwaukee all my life. Now I recognize that Milwaukee and Glendale are both in my district. And because of where I stay, I've had experience of growing up, going to Glendale days with my family, as well as, seeing what happens. And so first and foremost, I do believe that my personal experiences, can contribute to that. At one point, I had to work several jobs just to make ends meet. So I understand the frustration and the mental toll that takes on someone. And that's just me alone. So I can only imagine the stress and burden that can happen to families. So I understand the need for mental health, the need of making sure that there's regular transportation that's accessible, as well as that there are jobs that are accessible due to transportation routes and things like that. Second, I've been a social worker for several years now. One thing that I did at Justice Point, where I was a pretrial case manager, was implement racial bias training, with the help of other colleagues, the HR department, and YWCA, just because there is a need that I saw after the unrest of Sherman Park that year. And so it takes someone who not only, sees the pockets and trying to work with individuals to make their lives better, but also being willing to take that initiative. Third is that I'm willing to work across the table. I know that not everyone may agree, and that's unrealistic if I think that they should. But I do realize that, we can agree on one common thing though, and we can work on that together to create a solution. And last but not least, I know I'm going to put my best towards this, because I realize the responsibility it has to not only represent a district, but truthfully the whole state of people's lives and their well-beings. And so that's something that shouldn't be taken lightly. And with that, that's why I realize it's going to take more than me. It's going to take everyone to push things forward and get things done.
Thank you, Dora. Thank you for being with us today.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hi, Neil. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for inviting me. Glad to be here.
Great. So why don't we take a minute or two? Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running?
Okay. How many minutes do I have? I'm a local. I was born and raised on the northwest side of the city of Milwaukee, grew up in Milwaukee, met my wife in Milwaukee, and shortly after we were married, we moved to Glendale. We've lived in the district since 1982, so we've been here for a while. So by my count, that's about 38 years. So we have we've been a part of this community, a part of what's been going on in this part of Wisconsin, in the state of Wisconsin, for a number of years. I am by trade a small businessman. I spent about 40 years in the small business world and switched careers about 3 years ago as I was winding things down, became a public school substitute teacher. I've always been active and involved on the political scene, working in different campaigns throughout my life. And when I saw what was happening in this district and in this part of the community, the fact that we had an incumbent that went unchallenged at the ballot in 2 straight cycles. After the 2016 elections, I said that's not going to happen again. That even if I was the candidate, that there was going to be a choice in this district for voters, and voters were going to have a choice for a voice in Madison. And I know that's a pretty quick wrap up. I'd love to spend as much time as you want discussing my educational and business background, and can certainly answer any questions on that. But I know you have an agenda, and I want to address your agenda. So that's why I'm here. If you have any questions further regarding my background, my time in the district, and what I represent, I'm sure we will get through them in the interview process. So I'm open for anything you want to know.
Well, why don't we do this? Let's start with schools. We have one of the oldest voucher programs in the country. How would you compare your views of public and private education funding with those of your Republican opponent or Republican Assembly as a whole?
Okay. I am, first of all, a big advocate of public schools. And I think the responsibilities to the taxpayers and the citizens in the district, in the state of Wisconsin, are first and foremost to make certain that public schools have adequate resources, that the resources are not drained for other purposes, and that they are directed to the public schools. As I indicated, I've spent 3 years as a substitute teacher, almost exclusively at Nicolay High School in the district, and I see that the needs are there. Nancy and I have raised 3 children. They've all gone through public schools, graduating from Nicolay High School, and our 2 daughters are both students at UW Milwaukee. There certainly is a place in Wisconsin and anywhere for alternatives, because no system is perfect. But I think that the legislature has handcuffed and mishandled the public school financing formula at the expense of the citizens in the district. And I would not support continuing to do so. I think the Republicans have done that, and I not only are they guilty of draining funds from the public schools, but worse than that, they are guilty of handcuffing communities from major cities like Milwaukee to suburban communities by restricting how they can support their public schools. So that needs to stop. That needs to be reversed.
So let's talk about bigger picture things. What do you consider the biggest challenges to the success of the state and the well-being of its population?
Okay. That is a bigger picture for certain. And let me start by saying that this campaign has been a long time in the works. I indicated early on in the interview that I was very upset in 2016 when I saw that the incumbent, Alberta Darling, was running unopposed. So, and I think that speaks to the problem in Wisconsin, where we have legislators in Wisconsin who are responsible to nobody. And since I filed papers for this office on October 4th, 2019, and spoken to lots of people, the number one complaint that I get about what's going on in Madison, what's going on in the district, what's going on in the legislature, regardless of what community I'm talking to, whether it's in Brown Deer or Glendale or Mequon or Menominee Falls or the city of Milwaukee, the number one complaint is the corrupt, criminal gerrymandering that has existed in Wisconsin. Wisconsin is the most gerrymandered state in the nation. The gerrymandering that occurred in 2011 excludes the voices of low income and people of color and disenfranchises everyone. That gerrymandering was engineered by Fitzgerald and Voss and Scott Walker, and it had the total support of Alberta Darling. And that is the number one challenge that we face in Wisconsin going into this election and coming out of this election in 2021.
All right, well, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about transportation. Transportation issues within the state have never been resolved or even moved forward in the last 10 years. How would you address the need for increased funding without causing undue burden to the people in Wisconsin?
Well, that is another hot button topic that people have talked to me about. The inexcusable neglect of transportation and infrastructure, whether it's roads or bridges, that have been left in disrepair, endangering the citizens of Wisconsin, all of us. That it's been ignored and it's been pushed aside so that the budgets look good, but that's so that we need to pay the piper at some day, and that burden is going to be transferred down the line. It's got to be taken care of. Our safety is at stake. The way it needs to be handled is fairly, and as you said, not a burden, not an extra burden. And the fairest way to handle that is the gas tax, because that not only does that impact users fairly, but it also allows Wisconsin to recover costs from people who use the system but don't necessarily live here. If people are coming into Wisconsin from Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, wherever, and if they're renting cars and driving through the state of Wisconsin, they need to put gasoline in there, and the gas tax needs to be indexed to address the needs for our road repair, address the needs for our bridge repairs, and address all of those needs. Another matter that I think should have been addressed and could have been addressed a decade ago was the rail system. We had an excellent plan to expand rail throughout Wisconsin into neighboring states, and that was squashed by the Republican legislature. My younger daughter spent 2 years at the University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. If she was home for the weekend, the only way outside of getting a ride from mom or dad, if she wanted to get back to Eau Claire, she could take the Amtrak up to La Crosse, transfer to a bus, and then get up to Eau Claire. Or she could go down to the train station in Milwaukee, get on a bus that went up to Green Bay and across Highway 29 past Wausau to Eau Claire. It was an all-day journey. The rapid transit system would have taken her directly from Milwaukee to Eau Claire. And we need to connect ourselves to our communities and to the 21st century.
Speaking of that, the economy of Wisconsin is precarious due to the global pandemic, but also long-standing losses of jobs in dairy or other rural areas. What proposals might you make or support to get these sections of Wisconsin back to economic health?
I'm not going to pretend to have a crystal ball because the COVID pandemic has its own schedule. Unlike some people who want to set a date to reopen the economy, the pandemic runs on its own schedule, and we're going to have to respond to that. We are definitely going to need to address how numerous industries are going to be impacted. And we don't know the answers. I wish we did. It would make the roadmap a lot easier. But certainly what we need to do, again, I'll go back to one of the comments I made on road repairs. We need to index, and some of the tax breaks and tax giveaways that the legislature has given over the last decade, which favor individuals and businesses that don't need the tax break, they need to be re-examined and brought to the front again, because we're all going to have to pay to fix this. As a student of history, I think what we are going to be facing in the next 5 to 10 years is going to be a challenge that we have not faced since the 1930s. That's my opinion, and from what I have seen here, that this is going to be more challenging than what we faced after 2008. And we are going to have to look at every source and every opportunity. We're going to have to develop a system that supports people, and we are going to have to provide health insurance that does not bankrupt our society. We have a generation of people who are not going to be able to afford to buy cars and homes. And it's going to have a domino effect on the economy if we don't address it from the starting point.
All right, final question. What experience and skills do you believe make you qualify for this job? And in what legislative areas do you feel you have the most to contribute?
Okay. Well, I indicated that the incumbent in this seat has been there for 28 years. Alberta Darling has been in the Wisconsin Senate for 28 years. So he's been in the legislature for over 30 years, running unopposed in the last 2 election cycles. She answers to nobody. I answer to the electorate. I'm not a career politician. I'm somebody who's a career small businessman, family man, and a member of this community. I approach this election, I approach this position with honesty, equality, and direct responsibility. I have 40 years experience in small business. I know what's going on. I know how to balance the books. I know how to be responsible to my employees. I know how to be responsible to my communities. I will work for change. So whether it's in the budget process, whether it's in the educational process, whether it's in the infrastructure process, and whether it's in the fairness process, I think the number one issue that we will be addressing outside of the after effects of the COVID pandemic, the number one issue we will be facing, as I started with, was redistricting and fair maps. And we need to bring fair maps to everybody in Wisconsin, so everybody's vote matters. We This is our district. It's not fair. We need to make it fair. So I have people talk about not wanting to have career politicians. I'm not a career politician. I'm not running to be in office for 30 years and running to be unopposed. I'm running to represent this district and to represent the needs of the people in this district so that the government that comes out of Madison treats everybody fairly. And that's why I'm qualified for this office. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, thanks so much for joining us this evening. We here at Grassroots North Shore hope this will be helpful to you, not only when you're voting, but when you're talking to others about the candidates. We also hope to see you again in just 3 weeks for our annual fundraiser with John Nichols this year and a stellar Wisconsin lineup. To register, just go to www.grassrootsnorthshore.com. No charge to view. Hope to see you soon. Thank you. To register for the event, go to grassrootsnorthshore.com and you can either go to the Events tab and click the fundraiser, but even easier, just go to the poster of the event, click it, and you will arrive at the virtual fundraising sign-up page where you can fill in your information. A day or two before the event, we will send you the link, and we hope to see you there on October 4th.